Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to biology. We are now in chapter 4, homeostasis and transport. So what do those words mean? Homeostasis and transport. Homeostasis is going to be about balance, right? Keeping your body exactly the way it wants to be. If you get too hot, you try to cool down. If you get too cold, you're going to try to warm up. If you don't have enough nutrients, you're going to try to get more nutrients. You get the idea, right? We are going to be focusing on the cellular level though, which means you eat food, you're going to get a whole bunch of chemicals, a bunch of molecules added to your body from the food you eat. And those molecules floating around here, all these dots are molecules, want to get into your cells, right? So the question is, how do all of these molecules floating around get inside the cell? And that's the point of this chapter today. So let's go into the vocab and start breaking down the words that we are going to use. Our first word is homeostasis. Your keystone definition for this is the regulatory process in which an organism regulates its internal environment. I'm going to admit to you guys, I do not like that definition. So let's make it easier. Homeostasis means to fight change. Things outside of your body are trying to change your body. If it gets hot outside, your body gets hot, and your body doesn't like that. So it's going to do things to cool down. If it gets too cold, your body will get cold and your body will do things to warm up. If you start sweating too much, you're going to lose salt. You need salt. So your body's going to try to do things to conserve the salt and keep you from losing it. All right? So it's all about balance, everything your body does. And we are going to be looking at this at the cellular level. So we're going to be looking at a whole bunch of words to deal with how your cells maintain homeostasis. So let's look at some cellular words. Phospholipid bilayer. Your keystone definition, 2 layers of phospholipids. Oh, I'm pausing right there. What is a phospholipid? Right, this is something from chapter 2. Remember the 4 macromolecules, proteins, carbohydrates, nucleic acids, and lipids. What makes up your fat? Phospholipid is a special kind of lipid that makes up your cell membranes. Phospholipid bilayer, 2 layers of phospholipids within the plasma membrane, arranged so that their hydrophobic tails are projecting inward, while their polar head groups are projecting on the outside surfaces. Keystone definitions. All right. Phospholipid bilayer is just a fancy way of saying your cell's membrane. That's it. All right. Look, take a look at this picture. See, if you remember chapter 2, I drew the phospholipid in a very simple way. It was a circle with 2 tails, right? Look really closely. Zoom in on this. Look at that. Look at that. Circle with 2 tails. And it's just a bunch of those all lined up. And there's 2 of them. There's another row upside down. So all the tails are on the inside and all the heads are on the outside. Why is that? Because there's water in your body and there's water inside the cells, and the tails do not like the water. So they're hiding in the middle. The heads are okay with water, so they're on the outside. And that's how your cell membrane gets its shape, from hiding from the water. That's what hydrophobic means. Hydrophobic, the tails hate water. And polar means they're okay with water. 3, fluid mosaic model. Keystone definition, the conceptual model of the cell membrane is a tightly packed phospholipid bilayer interspersed with protein molecules. Ugh. All right, guys, it's just another way of saying phospholipid bilayer, where this is what it's called. This describes what it is. Right? Let's break the words down. Fluid means it moves like water. All right, it's very loose and wobbly, like a water balloon. And mosaic, those of you in art class should know what a mosaic is. Mosaic is a picture, but if you look closely, zoom in on this, you see that it's actually a bunch of little pieces glued together, and when you pan out, it starts to take shape and look like some kind of picture. Your phospholipid bilayer is also a mosaic. You zoom in, like we said, it is a bunch of little pieces together, and when you zoom out, it makes one big picture, your membrane. So small pieces make a big piece. Number 4, carrier or transport protein. Proteins embedded in the cell membrane involved in the movement of materials into and out of the cell. Remember guys, we needed to get all of these molecules inside the cell, and sometimes we need to get molecules out of the cell. So these proteins are going to be like doorways so things can get in the cell or get back out of the cell. You can see it better in this picture, proteins. Sometimes we need to carry a protein, sometimes we don't. Concentration gradient. All right, guys, focus on this one. Focus, 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 focus. All right, people get this confused all the time. Concentration gradient. Your keystone definition is the graduated difference in concentration of a solute along distance through a solution. No, I don't expect you to know those words. Those are your keystone definition. Let's break this down. Ignore concentration. Let's look at gradient. What is a gradient? A gradient is a gradual change. Take a look at this picture. We have a gradual change. We have a lot of dark colors down here at the bottom, and it gradually gets lighter and lighter and lighter. This is a color gradient. Here we have a map down at the bottom here, right? And these lines are height gradients. Here's three-dimensional. What it actually means, it shows you a gradual change in height. So gradient is a gradual change. A concentration gradient is a gradual change in concentration of molecules. What that means is, guys, how tightly packed the molecules are. Here we have a bunch of molecules tightly packed together, and then a little less tightly packed, and even less tightly packed, and then nothing at all. It is a gradual change in how tightly packed those molecules are. And that's going to matter in this chapter. Right? This is what makes everything happen. Before we move on with definitions, you need to understand a rule. This is a rule across all of science. This will make all of science make more sense. So focus on this, all right? Nature loves balance. That's it. Nature loves balance. And if you can remember that, everything starts clicking, right? This is not balanced. There's a lot over here and nothing over here. So just by nature, these are going to spread out evenly. So a concentration gradient is going to cause the molecules to move over here. That is what we call passive transport. The transportation of materials across the plasma membrane without using energy. Ignore the plasma membrane. You don't see a membrane here, right? It's still passive transport if they're just moving from left to right. But because we are talking about going in and out of the cell, we care about that membrane for this chapter. All right, so passive transport would be these particles moving across this membrane, but you didn't use any of your own energy. It just happened because of physics. Right? That's all you need to understand. Just physics made the particles move. If you're really interested in how that happens, email me, we'll talk about it. So moving without energy. Diffusion is actually a type of passive transport that we just described. The movement of particles from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration as a natural result of kinetic molecular energy. As a result of physics, all right? High concentration, so it spreads. That's diffusion. And because we're talking about cells, there's going to be a cell membrane here. So they just happen to spread through the membrane until it's even on both sides. But here's the important key information here. In diffusion, it's these particles, which is a fancy word for molecules. These particles, these molecules are moving. The water that they're in stays put. So all of these particles are just going to spread into the cell because these particles are small enough to just get right through the membrane, no problem. Osmosis is the other way around. So the movement of water through a permeable membrane with the water concentration gradient. Keystone definition again, what that really means is if the particles can't move, the water moves. Take a look at this picture here. I drew a membrane inside this dish, right? All these particles want to get to this side. There's a high concentration, there's a low concentration. They want to spread across, but they can't get through this membrane. Sugar molecules are too big to get through. So plan B, osmosis. The water will go over to the other side. If the particles can't go from left to right, the water will go from right to left, increasing the water levels on this side and allowing the particles to spread out. Right? So again, that's plan B. The particles want to go to the left, but they can't, so the water goes to the right, so the particles can spread out up and down. That's osmosis. Facilitated diffusion. Before I go into this definition, what does facilitate mean? It means to help, all right? To allow to happen. So facilitated diffusion, a passive transport process in which substances are transported across a membrane with a concentration gradient with the aid of a carrier protein. All right, from here all the way across to here is just diffusion. So facilitated diffusion is diffusion with the aid of a carrier protein. Particles move with help. So now I got these bigger particles that want to get in, but they can't get through the membrane. So there's a protein. It is a doorway. And now that I have this big open doorway, these things are able to just get inside the cell. Right? Nothing is making them move. It's still just physics, but facilitated diffusion is they have a doorway to do it, or a carrier protein is what we call it. So here are your carrier proteins. A particle goes into the protein, moves through, and now it's inside the cell. Active transport. This is where things get a bit weird. All right? With passive transport, things just happened through physics, right? Through nature. If nature wanted balance, so they spread out and got balanced. Active transport is when your body doesn't want balance. Sometimes balancing is bad. Sometimes balancing will give you too much salt and you'll get sick, so you need to get rid of the salt. Right? Active transport is when you fight the balance. The movement of particles from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. That uses energy. Let's put a picture back up here. Where's it over? This picture, right? Passive transport, these particles want to spread out this way. Active transport is your body is going to say, no, this particle is too much. I want to push this particle back into the pile. That is hard to do. So you are going to use your own energy to push everything back to this side. So we call that active transport because you are actively doing this and fighting nature. So particles move in the other direction, the wrong direction, using energy on purpose. How are we going to do this? This is going to be the last couple words are going to be how active transport works. 11, one option is to use pumps. A protein which transports ions or molecules across a cellular membrane requiring the use of ATP. Right? Ions or molecules, I've just been saying particles. A protein which transports particles across the membrane using ATP energy. That's energy, guys. So pumps make active transport happen. So we got a concentration gradient, a lot down here, so they want to spread up. Active transport, we're going to use energy to push this particle down. Back over here to my board. I got all of these big round particles. Let's say these are salt molecules. Right? And they're all trying to get in. There's a high concentration here. So they're going to try to get in to balance out on both sides. We don't want that. Salt's good, but too much salt is bad. So we are going to have a pump that is going to require ATP. You read that there? I wrote ATP. And we're going to use that energy to force the molecules back out against their will. They all want in. we're going to use our energy to push it out. These pumps are like the electric doors at the grocery store, except they force you out instead of just opening easily. So 12, vesicles. A bubble-like membranous structure that stores and transports cellular products. All right, what you're looking at here, this is the phospholipid bilayer, the fluid mosaic cell membrane. And these particles, your cell wants it in, but they're too big to get in. But do you see any pumps? Do you see any proteins? No. So we have a backup system. Your cell is going to bend inward like this, sucking these things in, and then it's going to close off around it, forming a bubble. And that bubble is going to pinch off. So now we have a bubble of cell membrane inside the cell. This is called a vesicle and is used for transport. We move things around. And 13 and 14, endocytosis and exocytosis go together. Cytosis means moving around the cytoplasm, right? The liquid goop that this bubble is floating in, it's called the cytoplasm, right? Endocytosis means entering the cytoplasm. Endo, enter, inside. A process in which a cell engulfs, pictured up here, a process in which the cell engulfs extracellular material through an inward folding of the plasma membrane. Right? This is a picture of endocytosis. The particles go to the cell membrane, it bends inward, engulfs it, and pinches off, and now you have a vesicle. That's endocytosis. And 14, exocytosis. The exact opposite, the process in which a cell releases substances to the extracellular environment by fusing a vesicular membrane with a plasma membrane, separating the membrane at the point of fusion, blah, 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 the wordy keystone definition. The bubble rejoins the membrane and opens up and lets things out. And that's very important, guys, that this bubble containing molecules rejoins the membrane and opens back up, because this is what makes your nervous system work. Your nervous system is made up of a bunch of cells called neurons, and those neurons' job is to reach out and connect to other neurons. And they had kind of a whisper down the lane of communication. And how they're communicating with each other is through exocytosis, where the vesicle rejoins the membrane, kicks these chemicals out, and those chemicals then go to the next neuron, the next cell. This is called a synapse, and in the synapse, this neuron tells this neuron what's going on through use of these chemicals. These chemicals are called hormones. They tell your body what to do. So your body knows what to do because of exocytosis. All right, guys, so that is it for the vocab for this chapter. Come back next time and we're going to start talking about the actual notes and go into more detail about all these things. So until then, check Google Classroom, see if I left you any work to do, and I will see you in the next video.